a Motorsport Podcast Network production. Hey everyone, welcome along. This is the V8 Sleuth podcast for Autobahn, celebrating 40 years of being all for the drivers. Shop in store or online today at autobahn.com.au. Now this week on the pod is a name you might have heard of in your travels that's been connected to motorsport and motoring for many years. Richard Emery these days is the president and the CEO of Hino Motor Sales Australia, but his career's had regular touch points with motorsport, particularly from a manufacturer point of view. Now, sometimes those touch points in OEM land have ended up with him in supercars directly, and in other cases, as you'll hear on this episode, sometimes they have not. Now, on this episode, he opens up on something that I've heard a little bit about over the journey, but never heard this level. Mitsubishi's work to enter V8 Supercars as it was back then with the 380 model. Plus, the inside line from his time at Mercedes-Benz Australia of how the Erebus V8 program came to be and how and why it didn't have the support of the Aussie arm of the company. There's plenty to chew on in this episode, so let's get stuck into it. It's the V8 Sleuth podcast for Autobahn, part 1 of 2 with Richard Emery. Richard Emery, welcome to the podcast. Do you know that you're making history on this episode?
No, you better tell me about that.
Well, I'm not sure that it's history that's like mega exciting, but as far as I'm aware, you're just the second Ballaratian to appear on this podcast.
Ah, Mr. Crompton and I, yeah?
Yes, correct, Wade. I'm not counting myself as appearing on it because I'm...
I was about to say, does everybody know you're from Ballarat?
Yeah. So it's sort of three of us across the journey. So it's the Ballarat Mafia of motorsport between the three of us. And
let's go with that.
Sounds good. Thank you for stopping by, because a lot of our listeners might say, what did he race? Hang on, where have I seen him before? Well, how do I know him? But you and automotive, motorsport, motoring, trucks now, you got a long, long history in this stuff. And there's a lot that we've got to talk about here. But where does you and automotive and cars and all this stuff start?
Well, it's a family thing more than anything else. So my father has been involved in the automotive industry for a long time, and in motorsport through that time. And I suppose he comes from a generation of people who were car lovers first, who became business people in automotive because probably to fund their motorsport to be some extent.
There's a few that have done that over the journey.
And actually it's a bit of a thing that's changed in motorsport and automotive over the last 40 or 50 years. A lot of people I deal with now who run automotive businesses aren't really car people. They're kind of business people first and foremost. But my dad comes from a generation that were into cars.
And this is in Ballarat as well?
No, starting in Melbourne when he left school. So long, going back here, in those early years, he worked with Norman Hamilton, Alan Hamilton's father at Porsche. He then worked for Alfa Romeo, Volvo, a number of brands before he became a car dealer. And he was in the car dealership scene both in Launceston in Tasmania, but also in Ballarat, which is obviously where I grew up.
Yeah.
But through that time, he was involved in motor racing at varying levels, a club racer, so administration. Some of your listeners might know his voice from commentating historic racing and Targa events over the last 20 or 30 years.
We should say John Emery's the name.
John Emery, yes, sorry, John Emery.
And John Emery Motors is what,
from Ballarat.
Yes, Ballarat.
Yeah, that's right.
Driving past all the time.
Yeah, so cars and racing was part of my childhood, I suppose. When I was, I suppose, primary school age, Dad raced Mini Coopers and Alphas. That was our weekends out at Calder.
And this is Calder like short track, original Calder.
Short track,
isn't it?
Dusty, windy, hot, all those sorts of things. And probably how a lot of people went motor racing in those days. Mum's Cooper S was Mum's car during the week, racing on the weekends, and we all climb in and get out to Calder to go racing for the Saturday or the Sunday. So that was, I suppose, he was in the automotive business and he was involved in racing. And I suppose one of the other connections here is, I know you guys have covered this particular topic, at the very start of Appendix J, so what is Group N now, I think.
Yeah.
Dad had the Julia Super TI that won the Bathurst. Sorry, not the Bathurst, the Sandown 6 Hour, both in 64 and 65. So he restored that car and raced that in the early days of Appendix J. So that was kind of my involvement in automotive and motor racing through my years of growing up, I suppose.
Yeah. How did he come to... So that's the car that won the first... It was a Sandown 6 Hour in those days, before it's the 500 that we knew in the aftermath.
That's right.
So it was Dr. Roberto Bussanello and Ralph Satch and Aussie Guy.
Yep.
Then the next year it was Frank Gardner and Kevin Bartlett in the same car.
Correct.
Winning 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
And then the Sandown Enduro went away for a while, and then it came back, and it was the pre-Bathurst sort of race after
Correct.
that. But how did he end up with that car? And I guess this is what I've found a lot over the years. It was just an old race car that, as the years went on, people went, wow, that's special because of what it did back then.
Yeah.
But it's in that sort of time window after it did its thing that it's okay, but it's not. No one really gets too frothed.
And I don't know all of the full details, but I can give you some highlights about how we, as a family, finished up with the car. So, as you say, the car won the 64 race. Kind of was entered in the 65 race as a backup, because they bought a GDA coupe to compete in 65 with the intention of winning it with the 105 coupe. But in the end, the old faithful came through and got it done in 65 as well. The car then, I don't know the timelines, but it finished up with a guy in Tasmania who crashed it at Longford, is my understanding. And the car basically stayed in Tasmania after that. And because my father had been involved in Alfa Romeo and Alfa Romeo racing through the 60s, he knew of the car, or knew the car, or the provenance of the car. And I'm not sure how he found out, but the guy who owned it in Launceston was going to turn it into a speedway car.
No,
because it was left-hand drive, and
it makes sense for the way that you go around a speedway.
And
there wouldn't have been any other Alphas speedway car.
No, sure. So I'm not sure the background as to why it was going to turn into it. But anyway, my father knew how important the car was, and purchased it, agreed to buy it, and it was in pieces, boxes and shell and whatever else. And then together with some of his mates from the Alfa Romeo Car Club here in Victoria, they spent time restoring it over a period of time, back to period, because that was in the lead up to Appendix J. And it was one of the early cars to be involved in Appendix J, when I suppose we're talking now late 70s, early 80s, when Appendix J came along. Yeah.
I remember that car leading the field, I guess, I don't know what you call it, warm-up lap, formation lap, parade lap, before the Sandown 500 in 94, because it was the 30th anniversary of its win.
Yeah,
I vividly remember it running around, but I didn't, at that stage, I wasn't kind of tied into the Ballarat Light Car Club, and then soon after came to know of your dad and people who'd been involved in the Light Car Club in Ballarat and Ballarat Light Car Club. So, but still, as the junior, well, I guess I was a junior sleuth without knowing at the time, but I knew that was something. I wasn't a hardcore Alpha tragic, but I knew that was something pretty special. And then to figure out that it actually is in the hometown, is kind of cool. But
it sat on my dad's showroom floor at the dealership through the late 70s and early 80s.
Yeah, it's still around. It's overseas.
It's overseas now. Yeah, so because it has such unique provenance, a really big collector of historic Alfa Romeo race cars approached Dad. It went to Japan originally, but I think it's now based in Europe, in UK, I think.
It's a little piece of Australian history is across the. Now, have you ever got behind the wheel here? Because I know your brother's been involved in racing, your dad been. Where do you feed into? I mean, the automotive and motor racing connection for you is strong, but getting behind the wheel and having a run hasn't been part of it.
No, it hasn't. My brother had the motivation and the desire. I probably didn't. Obviously, I'd moved off towards an automotive career rather than a racing career. Mind you, I've had some amazing opportunities to drive quick cars on circuits around the world because of my career. So I've kind of had my fill of racing excitement
a little bit
without having to spend the money.
That's a very smart bit of.
So no, I've never been involved myself. It's apart from my father, my brother did some still does some MX-5 racing, did some HQ racing, did some Formula V back when he was younger. And he's been involved in motorsport along the way as well. Worked for Auto Action for a period of time with Bruce Williams, and has been involved in motorsport at various levels as well. But yeah, a bit of a club racer more than anything else.
Yeah. There's Emerys everywhere.
But yeah, not me. No.
Well, there's time. Yeah. You never know. Automotive career-wise, is it Land Rover where you?
Yeah, I started. I started in the manufacturer world with Jaguar Land Rover here in Australia, which didn't have any motorsport. But I was in kind of sales and marketing and logistics and stock control and things like that early on in my career, and then have been through a number of brands since.
And we're going to go through those. Well,
Right.
it's not a long list. Like we won't be here all day. But so then there was Audi Asia Pacific. Was that in Singapore?
Yeah, I went to live in Singapore to work for Audi, which was a really interesting 3-year period. So we're talking the late 90s here. Audi was having a bit of a surge globally. There's a bit of motorsport in that.
Super Tourers,
and it was kind of part of Audi's marketing exercise. It was interesting. I said earlier about a lot of people in the car industry nowadays are not really car people, yeah. And it's an interesting difference between a lot of people say, how come there's so many New Zealanders doing well around the world? The automotive industry in New Zealand supports the sport. It's not so much in Australia anymore. You know, I mentioned my dad's, and you had, Reg Hunt was a racer. Bib Still was a racer. A lot of the people who had big automotive empires were racers first and foremost.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen so much in Australia anymore in terms of supporting, potentially young drivers. We're in New Zealand.
They're everywhere.
And I've been responsible for New Zealand through my Nissan and Mercedes-Benz days. The automotive industry in New Zealand really is engaged in motorsport. And the same thing was interesting with Audi. There's a lot of markets where motorsport was a key part of Audi's marketing platform. But I was responsible for 3 markets that weren't interested in motorsport. So I was...
Damn.
Yeah. And an interesting consequence. So I had Korea, Indonesia and Malaysia, and the guys that who were running our operations in those countries weren't really into motorsport. And there's one of the best days of my life, I have to say. We took them all to a business conference in Florence, and day 2 was a track day with S model Audis, and none of them wanted to go because they wanted to go to the Leaning Tower of Pisa or
Do the tourist thing.
Yeah, because they weren't really interested in racing. So they still had this whole track day program set up. So the 3 or 4 of us from the Singapore office, so we'll all go out to the circuit, and we spent a day doing the track program with, I'm trying to think of the circuit near Florence. They race MotoGP there.
Mugello?
Mugello, yeah. I spent the whole day at Mugello
Powering around.
because the people the program was set up for
Didn't want to do it. Well, someone had to do it.
Someone had to
It's all
do it.
set up ready to go.
Yeah.
Set to go. So next after that, and this is kind of where the motorsport stuff for you really kicks in, is Mitsubishi. And
Correct, yeah.
so that's 2002. So sales and marketing at Mitsubishi, and of course, when I think Mitsubishi, I think Rally Art.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of motorsport on the go in the time that you're there.
Yeah,
So when you turn up there, what have you got in motor racing world there?
Yeah, so I went to Mitsubishi as the head of marketing. And obviously at that point in time, Rally Art, Mitsubishi was Rally, the Australian Rally Championship, and the WRC for that matter as well. And it's interesting, there'll be a theme through some of the topics we talk about here about how manufacturers make motorsport decisions. There's lots of politics involved, internal struggles, tensions, all those sorts of things. Money, budgets, CFOs who don't want to spend money on motorsport, all those sorts of things. So I got to Mitsubishi, and because I was head of marketing by design, Rally Art and the motorsport program kind of fell in my remit, together with a guy called Kevin Taylor, who was the head of PR at the time, who was really driving the rally program before my arrival. But there wasn't a lot of corporate support outside of that kind of marketing and PR team. Mitsubishi had its struggles from a manufacturing perspective in Adelaide at the time. So it was a business under some tension. So the Rally Art program was, at that point in time, the ARC. The ARC was kind of struggling a little bit back then. Obviously, there was Toyota, ourselves, and Subaru involved. And Alan Heafy was running our Rally Art program. So we had Ed Ordinsky and Scott Petter, and I'm thinking 2005, 2006 here. Scotty should have won the championship in 2006. The car was quick enough. He was quick enough. We had a couple of bad, as it happens in rallying. I think the day that I felt we weren't going to get there was the Adelaide Rally. I was out on one of the stages and Scott idled past with a blown turbo, kind of looked at me across the paddock and went, arms up in the air. So we should have won the championship in 2006. At that point in time, Mitsubishi globally with Rally Art was starting to lose interest in the WRC, the car that they had after the Evo 6 Mackinnon period. The car, the Lancer got a bit heavy and really wasn't performing as well. Mitsubishi globally were under some financial pressure. So the impetus from Japan to Australia to continue with the rally program was kind of waning. Locally, there probably wasn't widespread support for the program internally because we had plenty of other things to worry about. But having said that, we did some tarmac stuff. We supported Mark King in I suppose it was the production championship back then. CT production or
performance cars or whatever. Yeah, that evolved out of a few.
Yeah, so we tried to spread our wings a little bit. We even had Magna all-wheel drive rally car win the production championship that year as well with Ross Duncan.
Yep.
And Michael Taylor, a journalist who drove the second car. And that was basically off the back of me wanting to keep the Rally Art brand relevant and live.
It was a long-term brand.
We're about to launch Evo 9, I think it was, or Evo 10, which actually was a very successful car when we launched it. But we needed to have that motorsport connection to keep that floating along.
Yeah. So somewhere in among all of this, you're smiling at me because you know where I'm going. And I don't know. I don't know if this really ever got out back in.
No, I don't think it did. No.
And motor racing, automotive. There's very few. I mean, you could probably count them on two hands. The number of big ticket stories that were kept. Toyota going into supercars is a classic example of that. One was so well done and kept across the journey. Some of them about drivers swapping teams. Some of them about manufacturers coming in or leaving. Something about a ownership change of an organisation or whatever it is. Yeah, big ticket news.
Yeah.
Somewhere among all of this, there was a little bit of a discussion, maybe a bit more than a discussion, about Mitsubishi. And this is before Car of the Future. This is before Nissan, Volvo.
Yeah.
This is where in kind of project blueprint mid-2000 odds about bringing, because Mitsubishi had the 380. And I've done the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
That was released in late 2005 and produced through to 2008. So we're in that window of time. So people can picture it's BA Falcons, VZ Commodores into VE Commodores. Tell me, how much was in all of this that Mitsubishi had a good old look? Because it had been rumoured and pondered about other brands for years.
Yeah, Toyota and Mitsubishi had been around that time, And often in OEM or manufacturer decisions around motorsport, it's all about certain things happening at the right time for the right reasons, right?
Yep.
So as I think I've just said, within Mitsubishi at the time prior, there wasn't a lot of support for motorsport or for the rally program. We kind of the corporate approach was probably, headquarters are doing rallying, so we're kind of got to toe the line and do some rallying, right? Not that it was costing us a lot of money, but it was certainly part of the Rally Art marketing positioning, if you want to call it that. But a few things changed. So 380 came along. The rally program was waning. Rally Art had kind of stepped back from the WRC through 2006, 2007, or they were pulling back. And Rob McInerney came as our new president and CEO just as the 380 was being launched. So
who had been at Holden.
Who'd been
for
at
a
Holden
long time.
forever.
Yeah.
For a long time. So Rob came across to Adelaide to take over Mitsubishi from Tom Phillips, who had retired, and obviously took some time to get his feet under the desk. And during 2000, I'm pretty sure it was 2007, Rob asked me and a guy called Rob Chadwick. So Rob Chadwick was one of our engineers.
Is it Rob Chadwick that raced the Magnas in Jet
Correct.
production?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So to do some homework on taking the 380 in supercars, because 380 was a really important product for Mitsubishi, locally made, and Rob's experience with Holden was such that he felt that it was maybe the colour and excitement that 380 needed was to go into supercars. And so, obviously, being responsible for the motorsport program, Rob asked Rob and I to just do some initial investigations. And I've never asked Mark Scaife, but I'm sure that we had a meeting with Mark in Rob's office, and I'm going to say it's 2007. So you'll be able to tell me what Mark was doing in 2007,
racing for the Holden Racing team and owning it with Tom Walkinshaw by that stage. So all that was going on.
So I remember a meeting in Rob's office with Mark, and then Rob and I went off to, I suppose, do some homework. What would it take? How do the rules work? So Rob did the rules in terms of how could we make a 380 work, and I think if you'll know better than me, the rules were that you could source an engine from an associated company,
from your family, which is what Volvo did with the Yamaha engine and stuff.
So at that point in time, I think only in 2006, Mitsubishi had done a cross ownership arrangement with Chrysler.
So I'm thinking Mopar here.
Yeah. So there were Mopar NASCAR engine was where the obvious place to go, because we didn't have a Mitsubishi V8 engine. So Rob did some homework on accessing a Mopar engine that might fit the criteria, which I think the answer was yes, it probably would. And I think he actually sent one of the spare prototype body shells to a guy in Sydney to do some club racing in, just to see if we could.
Yeah, right.
But I don't think they ever put a V8 engine in. I think it ran as a 6-cylinder.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think by the time we discussed it internally and looked at the money and all those sorts of things, we were kind of waning on the idea. So I don't think the V8 engine ever got put in it, just to see if it would fit in the mechanics or whatever else. So yes, Rob did the technical homework, and I did kind of the marketing and the money. The figure, I remember the figure clearly. I said to Rob, it's probably $6 million to get from here to end of the first season. I think it was kind of the window, or the second season, whatever else. Doesn't sound like much now, but back then it was a lot of money, particularly with where Mitsubishi was financially and issues over production, the plant in Adelaide and whatever else. So I think two things then happened. We did the initial homework, got a fair way along before we were going to take the next step. And then I can't think of his name, but when there was a bit of a rumour about there's other manufacturers interested in. I don't think they ever named Mitsubishi, but certainly there was, we're trying to get Toyota in for many, many years, let's be honest.
Yeah.
A Holden executive came out really forcefully and said, we made this sport, we're not letting anybody else in. It was a really closed shop then. And so I think Rob kind of was worried about we were, putting people off at the factory. It was probably not going to be a great look for us to then go motor racing, even though, we probably could have justified it within our marketing budget. So it kind of stalled at that point when there was such a strong response from the incumbent saying, we're not letting anybody else. This is our party. We're not letting anybody else in. And obviously the financial and corporate situation that existed within Mitsubishi, it kind of didn't go to phase 2, I think is the best way of putting it.
So it's kind of one of those, didn't get to the point of presenting it to the powers that be, did the scope work, looked at the numbers, learned a bit. Circumstances aren't going to, the stars aren't aligned, basically. Yeah. And it basically just fritters away. And because it reminded me that there had been some years earlier a V8 powered Mitsubishi Magna Future Tourer, which there was a one-off. I remember the category that Bruce Williams had a few different names over the years, Bathurst Tourers, Future Tourers, early 2000s, part of the super touring sort of landscape. Low cost, converted Oscar, some of those early cars, but the whole plan was Commodores, Falcons, but then all the other stuff and put a generic V8 in, which they did in this Magna.
Yeah.
That wasn't a Mitsubishi project.
No.
I think it was put together by Bond Roll Bars up in Sydney, and Terry Bosanjak ran it, and it actually lives on. I think the Charters have got it in Albury, that car. It raced in the Bathurst 24-hour some years later in a bit of a modified state, but a V8-powered Magna did exist before this whole 380 potential. So, okay, so Mitsubishi and 380, we had a look, but it doesn't quite, as you said, the planets didn't.
Yeah, and I suppose from my perspective, it was interesting to see the reaction from the supercar world to the potential of what might come in as far as other competitors, and how, not close, but how, this is, I think the words were, this is our party and we're not going to let anybody else in. So that kind of, stuck in the back of the head, and may have come to the fore in the future.
Did. So from Mitsubishi, you end up at Mercedes-Benz Australia.
Yep.
So that's sales director for Australia and New Zealand. So we're talking, by this stage, that's late 2008.
Yeah, late 2008, late 2009. Yeah.
So this is before the Erebus Mercedes stuff kicks off. So that's a couple of years down the track before that all sort of...
Look, the automotive industry was going through some challenges in the late 2008, 2009 were pretty hard. I arrived late 2008 in the sales side of the business, and then over the next 2 or 3 years, we were covered quite nicely, which then obviously brings probably you to your next question. Will be around the Erebus thing.
It's a really interesting discussion point because of they were it was a program in cars that occurred despite the brand that had the badge not really wanting to exist is probably the kind of overall summary way to put it. Is that probably a fair way to put it?
Yeah, look, I think there needs to be some context around it. And I note that there's a documentary being released next month.
And is it Erebus doco?
So maybe that'll cover some of that. I don't know whether they've spoken to anybody from Mercedes-Benz in the making of that. It was an unfortunate scenario, really. But if I take a step back and look at the context of our business at Mercedes-Benz at the time, so we'd come through a difficult 2008, 2009, strong recovery through 2010, 2011, and actually we were on a bit of a wave of success going through 2010, 11, 12. And we had made a conscious decision to really go hard with AMG. In fact, 2011, 2012, I think Australia was the third biggest volume for AMG globally. But then when you went that into market size and whatever else, we were the best performing AMG market in the world. So really successful with AMG. So it was something that we had created. C63 became the thing to own through that period of time. And it was a really strong brand positioning for us. Very successful from a sales perspective through 2010, 2011. And then, so then the Erebus topic came up. And because I was obviously knew a little bit about motorsport, and we discussed at an executive level when we became aware of the program, because the program had gone a long way without us knowing about it.
How and when did you guys find out about it?
Well, clearly too late in the piece, hence some of the tension that came to the fore. So I haven't really discussed it with people on the other side, but Mercedes-Benz and AMG were kind of separate organisations. AMG ran a customer program. It was kind of their core, which is how they made their money. And Betty was involved in that through GT. She was a customer of AMG and a very strong customer of Mercedes-Benz, as well as racing Mercedes-Benz. So because of that customer racing program, she obviously, or Erebus, the team, had a relationship with AMG, and obviously touted this idea about, would you help us go into supercars? I suspect that it was not necessarily consciously kept from us until the last minute. I think it was probably just fell through the cracks in the sense that people at AMG probably, maybe senior people at AMG, probably thought that we knew. That we did.
Presumed. Yeah.
Ola Kalanius, who now heads the company globally, was the head of AMG at the time. So when it became clear to us that there was a program and it was AMG were building some engines and it was going to be an E63 platform, our action was, well, we've done a lot of work in the last 3 years to foster this AMG brand positioning and brand success. This doesn't fit with our profile.
And what didn't fit? The V8 Supercars, the category, how the car was being created. What didn't fit, or did none of it fit at all?
So I'll go back a step. So the next thing is that at that time, Mercedes-Benz businesses around the world were not allowed to go motor racing.
A bit like the old GM thing back in the day of no motor racing.
No motor racing, right? So they were saying our motor racing focus is Formula One, and they did some domestic DTM, and then everything else is customer programs through AMG, which was GT racing. Yeah. So as a national sales company, Mercedes-Benz Australia, we were not allowed to be involved in motor racing. Well, not allowed.
It was not.
It was, hey, you concentrate on that. We'll do
the racing can happen over here.
Yeah. So motor racing wasn't even on our agenda locally, and we had created a brand around AMG, particularly off the back of volume of C63. But we were about to launch in, I think it was early 2013 or late 2012, the next generation of the E63. So although the C63 was where all our volume was, very successful product, E63 was the pinnacle of the aim. It was a fantastic product. And we were about to do an upgrade of that car, which would have been the car silhouette that was going to be in supercar. So it was a $200,000 high-tech, incredibly, or peak what I would call peak AMG. That was an incredible car. And I know supercars would probably argue differently. Supercars at that time was pretty low-tech. Comparatively speaking to the car that we were about to launch. So from our perspective, there was a no-win position for us in supercars. If we won, people would say, well, of course.
You beat the family cars.
It's a $200,000 supercar beating a Falcon Taxi. I mean, I'm being extreme in my commentary here.
No.
If we lost...
That's bad too.
Like, you can't even beat a taxi?
Yeah.
There was a no win for us, right? And to some extent, we thought it was out of our control. Yes, we were unhappy about it, but until I think someone realised that there's something written into the rules that the manufacturer had to approve, which we weren't aware of. So all of a sudden we were given, well, we need you to say yes.
From V8 Supercars.
From V8 Supercars. And then there was this famous meeting in the boardroom at Mercedes-Benz, which I was part of, which was Tony Cochrane, David Malone, I think, from Emery, and a couple of people from Erebus. And we stated our position as to why we didn't want it to happen, which was around where our brand was, the work we'd put into AMG over the previous years, the fact that we're about to launch this upgrade of the E63. And I think it was written afterwards about, it was about us demographically believing now that it's a bogan sport. That never came into it. It was more about, for us, protecting our AMG brand and the fact that we had this new E63 about to launch. And I understand why Betty was confused, right? Because she'd been dealing with a Mercedes-Benz organisation and they'd taken her money and were doing the engine builds and all of that sort of stuff.
It's all going to be fine.
And then we thought we had no control, and okay, we weren't happy about it. But all of a sudden, there was this window where we can say no, and to protect our brand and our position and our approach, we said in that meeting that we don't want to approve this. What happened after that was, of course, that AMG then found themselves in a really awkward situation because they had taken Betty's money and had the program was quite advanced by the time we got to that meeting in our boardroom.
And this is, when's this, early 2012? Because this was,
the
deal was announced later in 12.
Yeah. I think this is early, mid-2012. I don't have the physical date off the top of my head. So then, of course, that created, because Betty had been, and Daniel had been loyal, great customers of Mercedes-Benz, both through the GT program and their own cars. And, I think confusion is probably where they found themselves in. It kind of, and of course there was some other machinations in there. So one of my ex-staff members was leading the Erebus program.
In Ryan Madison.
Yep. Peter Hackett was ran our drive programs, but was driving for Betty. So there was a lot of intertwined complications here.
Yep.
And then after that meeting, things were a bit tense, and it wasn't.
So that meeting is where Mercedes-Benz Australia says no.
Yeah.
So you said no, but it all still happened.
Yeah. So the next thing that happened was literally within 3 or 4 weeks, we had a nice driving program in Queenstown in New Zealand. Because we hadn't had a face-to-face with Betty, our CEO, who we obviously knew, Betty and Daniel. It hadn't got to a discussion at that level, right? But we had this ICE driving program in Queenstown with some of our customers, and Betty and Daniel were coming along. And so clearly that was going to be an opportunity for us to... But Peter Hackett was running the program, but he was also driving for Betty as well. So he found himself in a awkward situation. So the first evening we had a dinner in a restaurant in Queenstown, and everyone in the room knew this was going to be interesting. Even the customers knew.
They're all like, all eyes are on this one.
Yeah.
Table number 4 over there is the one to watch tonight.
And we welcomed everybody in, et cetera. And then I found myself, there's only one seat left, and it was sitting next to Betty. So I went and sat down, and she turned to me and said, "Richard, you're brave sitting here." And I said, "Well, yeah." But then during the evening, there was a face-to-face between Betty and Daniel and our CEO and a few other, Peter. I think Peter Hackett kind of said, "Come, let's all talk about this." And I'm sure, we explained our situation. She explained her frustration. I didn't expect really for Betty to understand the machinations of the politics of an OEM or a manufacturer. I think she was just confused as to how did it get to this point.
How did we get here? Yeah. And everyone understood where everyone was.
Yeah.
But it all, if you wind it all back, because it got so far down the track with AMG customer sport without MBA being even a...
Are you okay with this? Could we do this?
Could we do this? Could you support it? Could we market it? Could we leverage it? Yeah.
And then really in the end, because we were such a successful AMG market globally, AMG basically said, "Please, can you let this go ahead? Because we're already committed. We've already committed millions of dollars.
We've already done a pile of engine work."
So basically, Mercedes-Benz Australia was asked for a favour by AMG. Can you let this flow? Right? And that's where the shift came. Was, and I'm sure I've never actually asked our ex-CEO, but I'm sure Australia did pretty well out of AMG over the following few years in terms of supply and support.
We appreciate you gave us a helping hand.
So in the end, it was AMG appealing to us to say, "Look, we're kind of past the point of no return here. We really need you to reconsider and change your view," which of course is what happened.
Yeah, and those cars raced for I think 3 years in the end. They won a couple of races. Lee Holton had a win. Yeah. Will Davis had a win over in Perth.
And
there's a lot of love for those cars.
Yeah,
They sounded great. They said,
look, the best test for me was the first Grand Prix where those cars ran. Mercedes-Benz ran a huge corporate program over the back of the circuit, all our customers and whatever else. And I thought, I'll be interested to see how many of our customers who have been coming to the Grand Prix for 4 or 5 years will come out when those cars are on. And it was like they didn't view them as Mercedes-Benz.
Really?
So you would think, okay, the supercars are on, are all of our guests going to rush out to the front to watch the Benzes go past? They didn't, and I thought, that was a good test for me to say, well, we kind of were right in terms of our approach, because our people were more involved in the Formula One and the high tech and all those sorts of things. So that was kind of in my mental note the year after when they turned up at the Grand Prix. It was interesting.
How was in the time that the program did race in V8 Supercars? I don't think we'd had the change by that point. Were the waters okay between Mercedes-Benz Australia and Erebus and AMG in the aftermath of all of that? They did their thing. You went.
Yeah, I think that was the best way of putting it. I think. I don't think it will. It kind of never returned to the coziness that probably it was prior. That's understandable.
Yeah. It's life.
Yeah.
Not everything goes swimmingly all the time, and
that's right.
All the ways at all the places. So,
right.
But it's an interesting chapter of V8 Supercar history.
Yeah.
Here we are. It's 10 years since one of those cars. 10 years this year since one of them raced. Whenever we write about them on our website, whenever we talk about them on our podcast, whenever there's some video content that pops up around, there's massive engagement because the V8 Supercar fans, and for the Volvos and the different cars of the era, it was cool.
Add some colour. Yeah.
Added some spice. Yeah. It was different.
Yeah. There's so much interesting material to really think about in all of that, wasn't there? All of that stuff about Mitsubishi, it really didn't make a ripple at the time. That one was kept pretty quiet. But it's great to have some time and space between now and then to learn more about what was happening. It really helps open things up and topics get discussed now that at the time they just would not be chatted about publicly at the time. Now, on the next part of my chat with Richard, we dive into his time at Nissan and how one of his first jobs in the new gig was to fight to keep the Ultima Supercars program alive. That's coming up on the next episode of the V8 Sleuth podcast for Autobahn, celebrating 40 years of being all for the drivers. Shop in store or online today. Autobahn.com.au. I'll catch you next time on the V8 Sleuth podcast.